Welcome to the studio at That Nerd Show. I am Marcus Blake, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Erin Macdonald, commonly known as Dr. Erin, and Star Trek prodigy, and top Star Trek science advisor. If you think that science isn't cool, well, she's going to prove you wrong, especially for you girls out there that are thinking about a career in science. So, all right. Welcome. We thank you for interviewing with us. So we're going to jump right into it.
All right.
How did you get involved with Star Trek?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got involved fan first, I guess. I left academia, I missed teaching, and so I started going to sci-fi conventions and giving talks on the science behind all of my favorite science fiction franchises. And through that, I did that for a number of years all over the country. I met tons of writers, creatives, and started to get kind of pulled into different projects folks had. I moved to Los Angeles and we started to connect more seriously with everyone I had met. CBS heard about my Science of Star Trek talks, and so they had me come to their official events. At the time was Star
Right.
Trek Las Vegas. And that's kind of how I got on their radar. And then as all of these Star Trek shows started coming in, the first one I worked on was just one gig on season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. And then we saw the value of having a single point person for all the science in the franchise. And that's me. And that was about 5 years ago. So
All
yeah, it's
right.
been an adventure.
Um, well, I think that's the great thing about Star Trek compared to other, like sci-fi is having the technical advisors. Like, look, you have to make sense. You can't just say such and such does this and have people believe it because there's smart enough people that are like, that doesn't make sense. It's not what I studied in school. Like that.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
um, Star Trek Discovery. Okay, that was the first one that you popped up. But you talk about you were a fan first. So did you grow up watching Star Trek with like your parents?
I didn't discover Star Trek really until I was in college.
Okay.
I like to joke that there's a big intersection in the Venn diagram of physics majors and Star Trek fans. And at our college parties, they would be playing Star Trek in the background. And of course, I make that fateful comment of like, oh, I've never really watched Star Trek. And
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
yep. 30 seconds later, we're all sitting in front of the television. They put Measure of a Man on, and we're watching it.
Okay. Segue. When I talk about Next Generation and what is literally the best episode, that's it right there.
It's so good. They
That,
chose wisely to be the
yeah,
first show to watch
it
completely.
is one with hardly, I mean, there is no action. It is literally the great allegorical tale of what defines a sentient being,
Yeah,
and the
so
strive to be
brilliant.
human by data. So,
It's so good. And yeah, it still holds up as one of my favorite next gen episodes for
yeah.
sure.
Well, and it's funny too, when they came out with Picard and the 3 seasons and all that, and I don't comment on season 2. I kind of ignored that because I don't know what they were really going with. But season 1, I loved very much because it kind of expanded on that idea, of consciousness and being able to transfer it, um, and it was a great send off, to that character. And it's to me, it's like the great, it's a great prologue or epilogue, sorry,
Mhm.
to Measure of the Man.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. It's great to call back to that
Yeah.
episode. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, to get introduced to Star Trek by that episode. Yeah.
I mean, and it wasn't a hard sell from that point. Like, let's be honest, I
No.
pretty much jumped right in. And then I remember when the night we graduated was the midnight premiere of the Kelvin 2009 film. And
Nice.
so
Okay.
we all went to the midnight showing, and I remember going in, like, our entire physics class, like we went to that. And I remember walking into that theater and just seeing all the Star Trek fans who haven't had Star Trek in a really long time,
Right.
so excited and so jazzed. And I was like, oh, these are my people. And that's when I
I am
that's when I really fell full into Star Trek fandom.
That's funny. Like I'm just trying to imagine somebody, and when you're in college hitting on you, like, I've never seen Star Trek, and just the eye roll, like, I can't, I just can't.
Yeah, totally, exactly.
But you've been saved now, so I
Yeah.
mean, and by the way, I mean, if you have the ultimate nerd credentials at this point, so all right, so let's talk about the science of Star Trek. What do you, because I think even Star Trek doesn't always get it right, or it hasn't in the past. What, as a scientist, what do you feel like is the one thing that they kind of didn't understand, or the writers didn't understand, and we're just kind of making up? Is there a particular thing that comes to mind?
Um, Not particularly. I think Star Trek always tried to at least have a good backbone in science.
Right.
Famously, Gene Roddenberry wanted to call warp drive the time warp drive, and then one of his buddies who worked at Raytheon was like, "Yeah, nope."
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's always kind of had a little bit of a scientist kind of putting a bug in their ear. I think what Star Trek does well is it allows itself to have wacky, fun, not scientific stories, but
Right.
it knows how to thread the needle of like, let's just not explain it. Like, let's just let it happen. And then when it does try to explain some of the stories, it takes that role really seriously. And at
Right.
least, you feel like there's a backbone. You feel like there is an attempt
Yeah.
to have some good science in it, for sure.
Well, even if you're dealing with theories that haven't necessarily been proven yet, but I think that's the great thing about Star Trek is it keeps propelling us forward within science.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think,
yeah,
yeah. One of my favorite examples, sorry, was the transporter, because like
mhm,
physics says no, right? The
right.
Heisenberg uncertainty principle, you can't know exactly where every single particle is. But in the next generation, O'Brien's like working on the Heisenberg compensator. And the joke in Star Trek is like, how does the Heisenberg compensator work? It works very well. Thank you.
That's actually my co-host on our Saturday morning podcast, Brendan Smith, comments on that all the time. It's like, yeah, it always takes a non-enlisted engineer, chief petty officer, because he's former Navy, to figure it out.
Love it.
Yeah,
O'Brien is a champion. We love
no,
O'Brien.
that's one of my favorite things about Deep Space Nine is he really gets to shine more than
Oh
anything
my
else.
gosh.
Uh,
Agreed. Yeah.
so I can't say that he's my favorite engineer, but definitely right up there. So,
Yeah.
um, all right. It's funny that you talked about calling warp time warp, because I feel like they kind of like, well, we can't call it that, but we're going to show you how it works in Star Trek 4.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. Yeah. We're gonna slingshot through a gravity well and go to warp
Right.
and go back in time. Yeah.
But speaking of time warp, and because we just wrapped up the final season of Star Trek Discovery, where they're dealing with ideas of jumping in point, and I love the idea of the little time bug that kept making them stuff. As a scientist, how do you rectify that to legitimize that concept?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that time bug episode. That was a lot of fun to work on. And I'm very grateful, because I started on season 3 of Discovery, and a lot of those writers had kind of carried through the seasons.
Sure.
And so I'd worked with the writer that episode before, and and we just get to sit down and have those conversations of, okay, how can we make this work?
Right.
And what's interesting is there's so much production stuff that comes into that too, of like, well, what actors can we get? How
Right.
much time do we have on each set? And that all has to be factored in when you're building the backbone of the science in that episode. And so, yeah, that was a really, really fun one. And I think for me, if I can just science nerd a little bit,
Go ahead. That's what this is
um,
about.
what I loved that we were able to work into that episode was the idea of relativity and how time factors when you're at warp. Because that's a question I always get asked is, we hear about like the twin paradox. If you go close to the speed of light, you experience time differently than
Right.
people do on Earth. Why doesn't warp drive have that issue? And that is because warp is building a bubble around your ship, but your ship is still experiencing time normally. It's still
Yeah.
experiencing normal space time, but that whole warp bubble isn't. That's messing with
Right.
space time. And so we were able to kind of use those concepts as they're out for the episode. And I'm just, yeah, I was really happy with how that pulled off.
Well, Discovery is not my favorite of the series. I loved what they did with it in having to jump so far into the future and kind of rebuild Starfleet, and her having to kind of rectify her past within that episode, and really jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
So that alone really made that interesting as they're trying to figure out it's really just one bug and stuff like that. So I had to ask, because there's so many things that's like, this doesn't make sense. And as nerds, this is an ongoing argument with us right now, because as much as we love Star Trek, we're also Star Wars fans.
Valid.
And just
Yep.
trashing them in their writers' room. It's like, none of this makes sense.
Yeah.
Where are you finding your advisors? Okay.
Yeah, it is a very complicated, in-depth process. Yeah.
So, your books. I want to get into the baby Star Trek book a little bit. How did that idea come about?
Yeah, I was approached by a friend of mine, Rob Perlman, who has written a lot of fun gift books. The Kirk Adventures of Kirk and Spock, the Red Shirt's Day Off, all of those sort of fun books. And they were going to do a 2 sort of baby board book series. One was my first book of colors, and then was asking if I was interested in doing a space book. And yeah, so Star Trek, my first book of space, is a baby board book targeted for 0 to 2-year-olds. Really more for the parents, but
Right.
it was still really fun. It was so interesting to write that, because it's like you have 11 sentences and figure out how you want to teach science and space in that. And so, one of the things I always like to start with when I talk to people about astronomy 101 is, what are places? What are cosmological addresses?
Yeah.
We understand the concept of an address. You live on a street in a city, and maybe a state or a county in a country on Earth, and you just keep going. And Earth is in the solar system, which is in the Milky Way galaxy. And so that's kind of the approach that I took with it. And then it was just a lot of workshopping those 11 sentences and trying to work in little Star Trek references. But what I like about it is the science in it is all, quote, real science, in the sense that it's not Star Trek dilithium. You're not confusing kids based on what's sort of fictional world and what's not. And we did the same with the artwork. All of the photos in it are real space photos, but then we superimposed cartoons of Star Trek ships and references. And so hopefully that creates that little dichotomy that kids kind of understand the real and the fiction. And yeah, it's a fun project.
Well, we just call that proper parenting, proper training for your children. I think that's just as important as, everybody poops, and, it's I get my love of sci-fi from my dad, watching reruns of the original series. And when Next Gen came out, having divorced parents, that was kind of a moment of, my dad wanting to share that with me. We have new Star Trek. Do you feel like this is just as good as the original? Because it's a whole new crew, and it's set like 100 years later. And you're really looking at 2 generations of Star Trek. Those who grew up with the original and those who, got into Next Gen. And so this leads me into, my next question. What is your favorite Star Trek series?
My favorite series is Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
By a long shot. I love every time I sort of stumble on a one-off airing of it, or like comes up that I watch an episode, I'm like, oh damn, I'm gonna have to watch the whole thing again, aren't I? It's so good, and I love the characters. And I remember when it came out, there was all that debate about like Babylon 5 versus
Oh, I know. We still have that.
Yep. But I feel like the characters we got in there and the stories that they told and the fact that it wasn't a Starfleet vessel and you
Right.
got to have Quark's business and
Right.
Garrick and all of this machinations, and as all of the forgotten children
Right.
thrust in the corner of the quadrant, oh God, I love Deep Space
I
Nine.
mean, there's an argument, yes, to be made that it's a ripoff of Babylon 5 and Rick Berman turning that down, and I get that. But I think also having that same concept in a Star Trek universe, and all these people coming together, especially the way it ended, that it works, and you can still have Babylon 5 unto its own and all that. There are greatest reference I've ever heard, if you want to make it pop culture, is it's the Casablanca of Star Trek.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so,
I would absolutely agree with that.
yeah. Wow, Deep Space Nine. I love Deep Space Nine for a lot of reasons, even though the first, it takes a little while for every Star Trek series to kind of get into its own. It's kind of a slog the first few seasons until they really start coming into their own. But the characters are so wonderful.
They're so good. And I think it's aged so well for not just the themes, but also the streaming era.
Yeah.
Because it was, that was sort of the early days of serialized storytelling, where if you missed a week, you were in trouble.
Yeah.
And you had to wait a week, or you had to wait a summer to figure out what was going to happen. And now people can just burn through it. And I think the storytelling lends itself well to that. So more people are discovering it.
See, that's why I wasn't that upset about like the pandemic, everybody having to stay home. I'm like, I've got streaming, we did streaming accounts for our outlet. Like I subscribed to everything. It's like, we're going to be home. We can't meet up or do anything. This is what we're doing. So
yeah, we're watching everything.
Yeah, binge watch everything. And it had been about 10 years, and I went through everything of Star Trek.
Love it. That's awesome.
So pandemic was not that bad because I had Star Trek. But I got to disagree with you. I got to go with Next Generation.
Okay.
And I also have this great love for Enterprise because it's the first one. It's the first captain.
Yeah.
And I love meeting fans. We did a panel years ago at one of our favorite conventions about, the best series, and just the debates that Enterprise was not as good. And I'm like, but you don't realize this is the first time they're exploring.
Yeah.
It's the first time
That's what I think. Enterprise did such a good job of tonally matching like what our space program is now to what it looks like in the Next Generation.
Right.
And it's like, what does that look like? What mistakes are made? And I think that's why sometimes it's hard for Star Trek fans, because they're working out the kinks. But like, I do really enjoy it.
And I love Archer. I have loved Scott Bakula ever since Quantum Leap.
Love it.
Like, you did that and you're a Star Trek captain. So and again, I get the fans' argument. It's like, but it didn't end well. Like, yes, the last episode's a glorified Next Gen episode.
Yeah, that was brutal. I have a friend who really struggles emotionally watching series finales because they were so traumatized by the end of Enterprise. They point to Enterprise. They're like, this is why I can't finish TV shows.
Well, I mean, I get
pretty brutal.
Some season finales really get it right. Some don't. Next Gen, I thought before Picard had a really great season finale, for that time. And of course, dealing with, Q as usual. I thought Deep Space Nine had a great one. And
the 12-part Deep Space Nine finale, when I do my rewatch, I literally reserve an entire day to just watch the entire 12-episode finale.
That's like, my God, that's like a great weekend.
It's a great weekend.
Yeah. I didn't actually really thought about that, because like about once a year I'll take a weekend and I'll binge watch, Firefly.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm gonna have to do that one night with the end of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, and I think they label it pretty well, that it's like it is literally part 1 through part 12.
Yeah. Um, it's funny that you talk about that. I interviewed Claudia Christian years ago for when we were talking about Babylon 5 and kind of how, sci-fi shows were always on the fence. They didn't know how they were going to end it. They didn't really kind of get a proper ending, what they were expecting. And where, show should always have in the bag, like if we don't know if we're going to get renewed, but we need that closure episode ready to go so we can close everything out and send it off properly.
It is funny if you watch Voyager with that in mind.
Yeah.
Almost near the end of the season, there's one episode that if they weren't coming back, that was going to be their way to get home.
Right. It's like we're going to have multiple ways to end this if we're getting canceled. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I loved about Discovery. I'm like, you didn't really know, and you didn't have to cram so many episodes, so it kind of ended exactly where it needed to be.
Yeah.
Have a great connection to Star Trek Enterprise.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. I read that in the script, full fist bumping the air. I was so thrilled with that connection. Holy crap.
My podcast crew have these private chats. So half the time it's like complaining of like, we don't understand these next generation of writers. How are you getting hired in Hollywood? Have you done, like literally our debate was, if you're not familiar with the original source material, like you've never watched anything, you don't deserve to write on a show. And two, if you've never taken any course in college about storytelling, mythology, and understand those building blocks, again, you don't get to call yourself a writer. That's just me personally, but I think it lends itself to, the difference between people who just don't get it,
right,
compared to people who do. And again, that's the great thing about Star Trek, is having the right advisors that would, come along. So you talked about getting out of academia and you started doing science talks and all that. What got you into that?
Honestly, it was the fact that I was such a Star Trek nerd while I was in graduate school that when I was procrastinating writing my dissertation, I was like, oh, I'm doing my PhD in gravitational astrophysics. Like,
Right.
I bet I could work out how warp drive works. So I would just fall down these little rabbit holes and then needed somewhere to tell this stuff to people. So conventions were a great outlet for that. But honestly, like even when I was teaching intro astronomy, I remember a moment where, because teaching astronomy 101 is always a kick because you have so many students, and I'm sure there are people here who can relate to this, that were like, they needed a science credit. Space is cool.
Right.
And I just get to like look at the stars all day. And then you come in and you have to learn math and you're grumpy about it. And I've taught every single one of those students. And so you have a lot who are just getting through it and they're really upset that it's not as cool as they wanted it to be. But we were talking about exoplanets, planets that going around other stars.
Yeah.
And we had just discovered a planet that was orbiting two suns. And I made the comment, like, it's Tatooine. And the whole class is like, well, wait, what? Like, is it Tatooine? Like, is it a desert planet? Could people live there? Would the sunsets look the same? And they started asking all those questions that, like, frankly, as an introductory science class, that's what you're teaching. You want people to think critically and ask questions and reason through stuff. And so we spent the rest of the class talking about how a planet like Tatooine could exist. And so for me, that was where I learned the power of using pop culture and science fiction to teach science and how effective that is.
Well, so my favorite story about Star Trek is with the original series and when it became popular and stuff like that. And, the actors, and I've talked with Nichelle Nichols before she sadly passed many years ago. And she confirms this story that, they were excited to visit Johnson Space Center and astronauts, people who are really doing it as actors. But the astronauts were more excited to talk to them because they had this show. And that kind of bridged the gap between real science and pop culture and making it cool. And sometimes you have to do it that way instead of being the stuffy old professor that says, look, this is how it really works. All the cool things that you see, this is the science behind it. It is real. Okay. So
Absolutely.
now I am curious, a little segue here. Have you ever had the student who had to ask you, can you legitimately land on an asteroid and drill a hole and put a bomb in there like in Armageddon?
Oh yeah, we talk about all of that. You have to. You can't not.
I'm not. I'm not saying it's not entertaining to have oil workers land on a flying, meteor, but at some point you're like, look, Michael Bay.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to get to meet Jason Isaacs a couple times, and for those, he's famous for a lot of things, but not a lot of people remember. He's the astrophysicist in that scene. That's what I was most excited about.
Right. Also, he makes a very good point. When it comes to your science advisor, you want the person who made an A and not the guy who made a C. So
Exactly.
for people who are running for president, you might want to remember that.
Yeah.
Okay. The importance of science in everyday life, because it seems like it's a big battle that it's not that important compared to why we need to do it. What do you say when someone asks that kind of question?
Yeah, I think, I get asked that a lot, especially studying astronomy, because other, things like medicine and other types of research that have more of a clear line to how it impacts society and
Sure.
humanity. Trying to justify funding for astronomy research and space exploration is a lot harder. But for me, I think I always try to argue that like space is really hard. I worked in gravitational waves, which when Einstein predicted their existence, basically said, well, no one will ever find them because it's too hard. And scientists took that challenge on. And in doing so, hugely advanced technologies in lasers, cryo research, surface materials, like all of these things that they had to figure out to make these big detections.
Yeah.
Do have an impact on our society. It's just you don't go into it knowing I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn this in order to solve this
How
problem.
many things in science were accidentally discovered?
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
that's a pretty important thing in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, scientific literacy and respecting the work that scientists do is really important. But I also think there's a responsibility of scientists to engage with the public in good
Right.
faith when good faith discussions are happening, which is always important. And I always ask, I've been in both scenarios where someone is literally just trolling me in person to say like, prove we didn't land on the, or prove we landed on the moon, or prove the earth is round. And they're just trolling. But
Yeah.
I've also been in conversations with like a older woman who fell down a YouTube rabbit hole and is now genuinely confused if we landed on the moon or not,
Right.
and is asking that question. And my approach is always like, if I'm not sure, which you can tell pretty quickly,
Right.
but if I'm not, to just say like, is there anything I could say that's going to change your mind? And if they say no, then I'm not going to
Right.
engage.
It's
But
don't waste your time. Yeah.
right. But if people are really asking, I think it's important for scientists to not dismiss them or call them dumb or get angry and defensive at them if they're really genuinely asking, because then that creates this barrier between that person and science writ large.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of courage to ask questions, and they don't get to meet scientists every day. And so scientists need to remember that and take that responsibility seriously, which is something I always try to do, but
Yeah.
it is difficult.
Well, if you don't have science that propels technology, then you don't have the useful tools like watching YouTube videos or the internet to where you can comment on bullshit, whatever.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, um, yeah, I always remark about the people that don't realize who invented what. Yeah, a few years ago, we reviewed one of our writers who's doing a lot more with science. We went to go see the Hedy Lamarr documentary. And I'm
Nice.
still amazed at the people that don't realize that she wasn't just an actor. She is the one that discovered what radar that would lead to Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Okay. That she, was very, very smart beyond being a sex symbol. Okay. And still the amount of people that still don't. No, she didn't really do that. No, yeah. Why do you not want to believe that? Is
I
that
know.
yeah? And I love
We did.
yeah.
I was pretty proud. We did label one of the ship classes in Prodigy, the Lamar class ship,
Yeah.
after Hedy Lamarr.
I
So
did notice that. Like
yeah. Yeah.
but I do love the people that always have the conspiracy theory, like we never really landed on the moon, or Kubrick, shot it all in a. It's like, look, I love Capricorn 1 as much as the next person. Slow your roll here.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's the internet's good for a lot of stuff. It's a very useful tool, but it's also the people with disinformation that are against education. That's what drives me nuts. All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your character on Star Trek Prodigy. I mean, it's one thing to be a science advisor and to help out, but to have your own character, a canon of all things in Star Trek. How did that come about?
It started in season 1 of Prodigy, where the kids are getting to Starfleet Academy, and Rock Talk is a young girl who figures out in season 1 she wants to be a scientist, but doesn't know what kind of scientist she wants to be. And working in the writer's room, they had asked me a lot of questions about what I was like as a kid, what my journey to discovering astrophysics and deciding on that, what that looked like. And so I was always very, very close to and attached to Rock Talk. And so I was honored that Kevin and Dan Hageman were like, well, Rock has to meet Dr. Erin. Like that's that's the only thing that makes sense. And so I wasn't named or anything, but I did voice it, and it was modeled after me, and I think credited as Dr. Macdonald. But I had the chance to meet Rock Talk and ask if she'd considered xenobiology, and that kind of sets her on her science path. And so that was really touching. And then as we got into season 2 and we start to get in deep into the time travel stuff and
Right.
and the complications of it, which is hard for anyone to wrap their brains around, let alone on a kids show, the writers were kind of like, oh, we need a Mr. DNA explainer video.
Now I'm just imagining like the little paperclip video in Jurassic Park trying to explain how this works.
Exactly. And so we already had a professor at Starfleet Academy who also happened to be an expert in temporal mechanics. So that's how I ended up teaching temporal mechanics 101 on screen. But I love it. Someone did, one of my friends sent me a message and said, oh my God, you're the Clippy of temporal mechanics. So yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to be a Star Trek advisor, but that's a great honor to say, well, we're just going to have a character after you. You are officially ingrained in Star Wars canon now.
Well, and there's only one other person who's played themselves in Star Trek, and that was Stephen Hawking. And he played himself in hologram form. There's a lot of theories as to how I end up in the future. Am I a Q? Am I I think someone said like, oh, that's exactly what an Elorian would say. Or maybe in my near future, I get a Dr. Jillian Jacobs moment and I get pulled into Starfleet Academy. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge honor. The really funny thing for me is like, if you had asked me in graduate school what my dream job was, it was to be a professor at Starfleet Academy, but that didn't exist. And so I had to like settle for an aerospace engineering job. But I bought a license plate frame that says Starfleet Academy faculty member, and now it's true. So I'm very proud of that.
That is awesome. Yeah. See, I just want to live in a future where we actually have a Starfleet Academy where we're because I feel like what we are in society right now is like this is like we're close to the fall of man, and can we just get to first contact day, and start getting into the future, because it's like I want to leave all this. Please, can I have a starship that I can just be on and get out of this nonsense?
Yeah,
Um,
I know. And I think what is great and what I love is that fiction allows us that escape,
yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that. And you know, if we are going to follow the path of Star Trek to get to First Contact Day, there are some pretty big historical events that have to
yeah,
happen.
we have to go through. Thank you, Star Trek Enterprise, for showing us the dark days. Actually, but you
Exactly.
know what? I love one of my favorite Deep Space Nine episodes is the one where they get transported and Cisco is kind of in the prison, and then
Yep.
his fake character kind of becomes part of the timeline. I think
Yep.
that's a good one. All right. So last year we had a chance to interview Neil deGrasse Tyson. This is what kind of started the conversation. So we want to see if you agree with his answer regarding the best Star Trek captain. So I want you to tell me who you feel like is the best Star Trek captain, and we'll see if that matches with what he said.
I feel like we're going to disagree, so I'm already emotionally prepared to not be on the same page, but I will fight to the death for Captain Janeway. I will
Okay,
fight
okay.
to the death for Captain Janeway. I um I have gotten into not bar fights because it sounds more violent than it was, but
Is that the
heated
Scottish coming out in you? I'm thinking into a
heated
bar fight.
arguments after a couple of drams of whiskey about Tuvix.
That
And
happens.
it does happen, particularly at Star Trek conventions. But yes, Janeway is my captain. I am ride or die for Captain Janeway.
All
So
right. Yes, he did not say that. He did say Kirk, and he gave this really. We actually cut that video down to what he said and his reasoning was Kirk is, he's not playing checkers. It's always a chess game with him. When everybody they're on the brink of destruction, and I agree with him to a point. Like I love Kirk, but
mhm.
I disagree with both of you. I think I put Picard as my captain. So,
Yeah. But that's what's wonderful is that
yeah,
Star Trek gives us it's something for everyone.
yeah, I
And
know. And I think that's a great thing about Star Trek too is there's so many great captains, and that's why I also love Strange New Worlds
mhm,
because I'm a huge Anson Mount fan,
yeah,
and he just the embodiment of what I expect from Christopher Pike.
yeah,
You Nothing against Bruce Greenwood, who did a great job in the movies, but I'm glad that we're getting to explore that a little bit.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's a cool era of Trek lore, and yeah, it's a fun era to play around in.
so, so you said Deep Space Nine is your favorite series, but is Voyager your second favorite because of Janeway?
Yeah, and the Voyager ship is my little science ship that could, you know.
Wow, that's a great little. I never thought of it. That's a great little parable with that overall
Yeah,
storyline.
I have a blueprint of the Intrepid class ship up on my wall. I
You,
have a tattoo of the Voyager on my arm. Yeah.
you know what? You know what I feel like who you are in pop culture besides Dr. Erin. You're the Justin Long character in Galaxy Quest at the end that they have to contact when they're trying to figure out.
So funny you mention that because next to my Voyager tattoo is the NSEA Protector from Galaxy Quest because it is my favorite movie of all time.
Oh my God. Yeah,
I'll take that.
we did a panel at a convention one time with Bruce Boxleitner and stuff. And they didn't really talk about anything that they had done. They just wanted to talk about how they loved Galaxy Quest.
Yeah,
And it was the
valid.
greatest homage
Oh, it's
to a
just the
show.
greatest movie. I
Yeah,
love it.
it's great to talk about that on its 25th anniversary and how that still holds
Yeah,
up as a movie.
it does.
For anybody that says that you can make a sequel, you should bring it back. No, Alan Rickman's gone. I'm sorry. There's just no way
Agreed.
to do it.
Agreed. Yep. Don't touch it. It's perfect.
All right, so we got time for one more question. This is
Okay.
our famous nerdy question that we ask all of our filmmakers and stuff. So here you go. If you could have a superpower or a weapon of choice from the nerd universe to fight the forces of evil, what would you choose?
Hmm.
And you can
Okay.
have more than one.
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh, I mean, the TARDIS, I guess. I'm gonna just hard left turn, but my brain went like time travel, which how are you gonna, what object or superpower do you have for time travel? I mean, again, unless you're a Q, I guess, but
Right.
but stepping into a TARDIS
That's your
is
weapon of choice. And
that's
yeah, I will
yeah.
go with you on that. All right. So I'm going to interject one more question. You
Okay.
brought it up. Who is your favorite doctor?
Oh, okay. So I have the TARDIS also tattooed, but specifically with the Bad Wolf graffiti on it. So for me, it's Christopher Eccleston leading into David Tennant, but I love Eccleston's
He
doc.
never gets enough love. And I wish he had done more than once. I love Eccleston.
I
Good
love
friend
him
of
so much.
mine. Her and
And I
I,
love the
yeah,
Rose Tyler arc that bleeds into to
yeah.
David Tennant, and I think picked it up brilliantly. But yeah,
I,
Eccleston, if I had to choose
I
anyone.
love everybody from the reboot, but I always go with Tom Baker because that's the first doctor I
Nice.
was introduced to with my dad.
Salad. Yep.
You know,
Got great taste in scarves. Yep.
yeah. And it was great to go back and watch classic Who
Yeah.
during the pandemic and stuff. So, wow, I've never had anybody answer that question by just saying the TARDIS. Science and superpower.
Exactly.
Great one. All right, I could talk to you for hours, but I know we're going to run out of time here. And you've got stuff to get prepared for at San Diego Comic Con,
Yep.
but we would love to be able to talk with you again in the future.
Thank you.